Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. At this point, you should know who we are. So I'm not entirely sure we need to even do introductions anymore, Matt, but
Our names are at the bottom of the screen.
so if you don't know, it's right there.
Yeah.
So I don't even feel the need to introduce ourselves anymore. So we can just jump into projects from here on out. But we've got some good Star Wars content to break down today. Tales of the Jedi released
Yeah.
2 days ago, I believe, and oh my god, you guys, there's a lot to say on this. Matt, I don't know where we want to start. I don't know if you want to talk about it episode to episode, but
Yeah, let's talk about it one by one because there's there's the first one that kind of stands on its own, I think, and then there's the 3 Dooku ones, and then there's the 2 Ahsoka ones.
The first episode, I think, is
let's talk to the first one. That's the weakest one.
Life and Death.
Yeah, that's the weakest one in my opinion. Like, not even close. It didn't add as much as the other ones did. So let's talk about it one by one.
Sure.
And this is the one that's, I think, it's just the least interesting. I mean, it is, not to say it's not well done. I think there's a couple things about it that I like. Obviously, it's about Ahsoka being born and how they find out she's Force sensitive, essentially. Animation in this is stunning. So I think, first of all, that's like one of the things that stands out to me the most is like how far this animation's come in the last 15 years.
Compare it to Clone Wars Season 1, dude. I went back and I compared some shots and I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, it's animation's gorgeous. The like sound design and stuff, like of the tiger breathing, the animal, like after they shoot it, like as it's dying, Ahsoka's mom is out there and she like kills it and they're like respecting life. Like the way that they're in the forest, it's like I'm listening to it with headphones on, so I feel immersed. And that's one thing I really do appreciate with TV shows in general is I make music and I like sound design. It's a very interesting thing to me. And Star Wars does a very, very good job of that. And there's a couple other episodes, too, that we can get into about it. Like one of the Dooku episodes, there's a big droid walking around. And like the noises that they used for that were just so interesting and creative. So those are the things that stuck out to me. Like, to me, it's just like, all right, we have baby Ahsoka who's like with her mom. And then she uses her Force powers to get the weird saber-toothed tiger thing to bring her home. Which, okay. Cool. Like, you see my there wasn't that much there for me. I was like, okay, great. Cool. You know?
I really liked it from a mysticism standpoint. I thought it really added to like the fantastical nature of Star Wars. I don't know. Have you ever seen anything that Studio Ghibli has done?
Who is that? No, I don't know.
You don't know about Studio Ghibli? Okay, so it's basically an animation.
Studio Ghibli.
It's okay. So basically, it's an animation studio that does all these movies. I want to sum this up quickly, so I'll just send you some stuff later so you can look at it. But the studio made this movie called Princess Mononoke, and that character in that movie is who Ahsoka is based on because Dave Filoni loves that movie. And so when I was watching this particular episode, I could just see that influence coming in through here. Yeah. And you can totally tell where Dave was getting his inspiration from. And this episode just really reminded me of like old style storytelling. Like they didn't have that much dialogue. It felt very Western, very Kurosawa. Mm-hmm. You know how Dave Filoni did his episode of The Mandalorian, and that was based off a film that Kurosawa did. Mm-hmm. So I felt those echoes there, and I really liked how simplistic the story was. It added a fantastical nature to the Jedi, just like the idea of like what a Jedi is and how it is kind of like this glorified thing in this culture. So I really appreciated the simplicity of this story, and I didn't expect it to add much. I just thought it was just a nice, simple story. And it made me feel immersed in the fantastical nature of Star Wars, which is what I want when I watch it. So as far as like a first episode goes, like I agree. I don't know if it was necessarily like adding a whole bunch, but as its own story, I really enjoyed it. And yeah. I thought the spirituality of it, the Western vibes, the simplicity of the story. I like storytelling like that. So as its own standalone, I thought it was great.
Yeah, I think all of these, as they stand alone, were very good. It was just very good short stories, which I really like this format too. I like how they're short, they're easy bite-sized pieces, and the beauty of it. And I talked about this in my reaction. The beauty of it all is you can do it with anything. Like if they were to expand this, which I don't know if they will. I hope they do.
Please, God.
It would be cool if they did a couple more seasons. I think this might be like a test for them, but it's a fantastic idea. If anyone from Lucasfilm's listening. Greenlight it for a second season or more episodes because the possibilities are endless. You could do a Palpatine short story. You could do one on Luke or Anakin or Obi-Wan as a child, and like just
You could do Darth Revan, Darth
yes,
Plagueis.
yes, you could. Yeah, exactly. You could just do short 10-minute things and develop these, and it doesn't have to be that crazy. I mean, they were very efficient with the way they told these stories, which I really liked. They were very like there was no like wasted time, no wasted dialogue. Like it was just to the point.
Yeah, it felt
this was
extremely
really-
intentional.
Yes, and this was very well illustrated in the Dooku ones. So
So I think like the introductory episode, I think you and I will both agree, it's a good story. It doesn't add like too much to the overall Star Wars universe, but it was just like a nice story. It was just like enjoyable. Plus, it was kind of cool getting to see like Ahsoka's parents, and putting a face to them, which was pretty cool. Because I wonder if they continued this, if they would do something on that for like Obi-Wan, for example, because they revealed that like Obi-Wan had a family, he had a little brother, and that would be kind of cool to kind of get into his backstory. So. But as far as that first episode goes, I thought it was great. But the second one really kicked things off. Justice with Count Dooku and a young Qui-Gon. What did you think of that story?
awesome. I saw. I don't know if you watched my reaction, but I saw some Lord of the Rings influences in this. It looks like the village of Bree. Obviously, Filoni loves that. It looked like an old like medieval town, which I thought was cool. Obviously, I love to see young Dooku. He's one of my favorite like characters in Star Wars. I think he's super underrated as like a villain, and he's super interesting and more complex than I think people give him credit for. And I go into detail in that in I don't know if it's my first reaction video or second one, but it's like we don't really know his full motivations. We do know like he left the Jedi Order, but but we knew that he's a smart person. He wouldn't just leave for no reason, you know? And so they start with tiny hints of that in this episode that kind of we see throughout the next two with him in it. And I think they did a really good job of like, obviously I wanted to see that master apprentice relationship between him and Qui-Gon, which I think is awesome. And that's such good world building stuff. Like this is why these animated shows are valuable in my opinion. Is because they give you things that live action might not be able to do. Like I mentioned this in my reaction too, is I would love to see a live action version of this show. Like how cool would that be with just like short stories of this? Like that would be amazing. But yeah, I mean the relationship between Dooku and Qui-Gon, really cool. Some cool parallels there between some other characters in this episode as well. Like Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and I guess kind of like Obi-Wan Anakin.
Yeah, I mean, like, just the whole bit, like, at the end where Dooku talks to Qui-Gon at the end, he's like, hey, you're a much wiser man than I could ever hope to be, and Qui-Gon says that to Obi-Wan, who says it to Anakin, and it's just like you see that lineage from master to apprentice, like, going down the line. And it was super interesting in the sense, like, I don't know if you picked up on this, but if you think about it, it's like all of them, like that lineage of Count Dooku to Qui-Gon to Obi-Wan to Anakin to Ahsoka, all of them were disillusioned by the Jedi in some way, in a different experience. And it is interesting if you think about like their responses to that, because Dooku obviously sees the Senate and he's like, oh my gosh, this is really screwed up. Like we can't be serving the Senate because they're neglecting the people. But he takes that too far. Whereas Qui-Gon is very balanced. He's very like all about the Force and like trusting in the Force. Whereas Obi-Wan is looking at Qui-Gon and he's like, if you would just follow the rules, you would be on the council and we wouldn't have any of these issues. And then if you look at Anakin, who looks to Obi-Wan, Anakin looks at Obi-Wan, he's like, stop following the rules. Like the Jedi aren't always right. I'm going to do it my way because my way is better. And then Ahsoka looks at Anakin and she's like, he's super emotional. The Jedi are kind of screwed up. I don't like how the Jedi are in relation to me and what I'm doing and what's going on with Anakin. And then Ahsoka's response is to ultimately leave. So it is interesting to kind of see that train of thought. And I thought that was super prevalent, especially in this first episode with Dooku, because you're able to see all these individual characters, how they affected each other, and then their responses to how the Jedi have disillusioned them. So I thought that was a really, really cool tie-in. And ultimately, it all goes back to the Senate and their response to people. So I just really appreciated that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think getting some of that depth, and that's like just tiny little nuggets here, like how Dooku sees the corrupt senator, right? And that's kind of what influences him. Just like, Qui-Gon didn't really play by the rules either, just kind of like what you said, and Obi-Wan's like, yeah, why don't you play by the rules? But then he understands later in life, like, Qui-Gon's kind of right. He's doing things his own way, which is smart. And then we see Dooku kind of having to obviously fight the senator's men, and then he gets really angry about it, and you start seeing these like little hints of him turning, which I think was really cool.
Yeah, it was
And then
interesting
Qui-Gon,
when
obviously,
he's
they're witnessing it. Like Qui-Gon, you can see him learning during it.
picking up, and it like how it will affect his character in the Phantom Menace, where he's all
Right.
about just kind of like trusting the Force, and he's very spiritual, and he relies perfectly on the Force. He relies on the Force. I can't speak today. I don't know why. I'm getting ahead of myself. I've been so excited to talk about this for like the last 2 days. I can't even tell you. But I really appreciated that, just kind of seeing their tactics.
Yeah.
But I thought that I thought this was like a great introductory episode for the character of Count Dooku, and automatically in this first episode, he becomes that much more sympathetic.
Yeah. I've always been kind of sympathetic of him. I've always kind of like, and again, we can talk about this a little bit more. And I mentioned this at the end of my second reaction video, which I got to upload today. But I rewatched Attack of the Clones recently, and that scene that sticks out to me is when he captures Obi-Wan on Geonosis, and he walks in and he's talking with him, and he literally tells him the entire plan.
Yeah, I know.
He just spills the beans to Obi-Wan, sitting there, and he's like, "I wish Qui-Gon was here to help me." And Obi-Wan's like, "He would never help you." And I'm like, "Wait, Obi-Wan, let's hear him out."
This is a pretty drastic claim.
Yeah. Well, also, we don't actually know his intentions. Yes, he's a Sith, right? He joined Palpatine, but as we find out later in the last Dooku episode, he's really conflicted, and there's a couple really good shots here that show that are
Metaphorical.
Metaphorical. Thank you. And reflect that, but we don't know like what his plans were. He's telling Obi-Wan like the Dark Lord of the Sith is in charge of the Senate, and they're like, this would never happen. He's like, we can stop him. And these episodes give us more motivation behind that, and also make him such a more complex, interesting character. So that's just always been an interesting scene to me, is when Dooku literally just spills the beans to Obi-Wan.
Yeah,
Obi-Wan's
and
like, "I don't believe
it makes so much more sense, because then it just shows you how arrogant the council was. They're like, we would have seen this.
We would have known.
We would have known. Come on. And that really pisses Dooku off. And
Yeah.
you can tell, too, in his response in the third episode, of the Dooku story, which was easily my favorite, and I can't wait to talk about that. But we have the follow-up, which is episode 3, Choices. And that's one with Mace Windu. And I gotta tell you, dude, I have never been a huge Mace Windu fan. And after I watched this episode, I was like, you pretentious jerk. Like, I was not on his side at the end of the episode.
Well, right. And I think, but he is the character that reflects, I think he's meant to reflect the true
problems.
colors of the Jedi.
Yeah.
The colors of, yes, because in Attack of the Clones, he's very dogmatic in his ways. Same thing with Revenge of the Sith. He's telling Anakin, like, he's just a dick to Anakin.
He is. He's a total jerk.
And but I think he's the character who's supposed to reflect that pretentiousness. Like, hey, we're right about it. We're keepers of the peace. And Dooku starts seeing his attitude. And he actually has a really good line at the beginning where he says, your choices sometimes are inspiring, but also sometimes maddening. And I'm like, oh, that's a really good, efficient line. Like, on one hand, Dooku's like, I like being in the Order. On the other hand, it's like, we're throwing logic out the window a lot of the time. And a couple people mentioned, they're like, you're the Jedi are the lapdogs of the Senate, you know, and Mace Windu kind of is, like, keepers of the peace, but you just do what the Senate tells you to do.
He's
You're
the
not
poster
your own
boy.
entity. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's a really good point, what you just said. He is so pretentious in this episode.
He's so pretentious, but also, like, looking at the character of Dooku, like, there's a lot of parallels with Anakin here, too. Because Anakin's constantly questioning the way of things, whereas, like, I wouldn't call Obi-Wan as dogmatic as Windu. I think Obi-Wan is more conflicted because his whole character arc is that, like, he loves Anakin, and then when they're on Mustafar and Anakin's burning and Obi-Wan's, like, yells at him, like, I loved you. Yeah. That's, like, Obi-Wan admitting his flaw. Like, I wasn't supposed to love you, but I loved you. And so you have that character complexity with him, whereas, like, Mace is just, like, the deadpan, dogmatic, I'm going to stay by the rules. And so it is interesting kind of seeing that parallel with Dooku and Anakin in their questioning nature of things. And so I really liked how they drew those two connections together. And the
really did.
I can't tell you, like, the feelings that I had at the end of the episode where it's like Mace was literally trying to save his ass so he could get on, so he could stay on the council. It wasn't about like making the right decision for him. It was about, how can I ensure I get this woman's council seat? And I was like, you suck, dude. Like, You are the worst. And so it does kind of beg the question, like, for me, this episode was about what does it mean to be a true Jedi? You know, does it mean following the rules and going by the book and going, okay, this happens, so we're going to report back to the council? Or does it mean, like, you need to bend the rules? So I thought they brought up a good, I don't want to know if it's like a morality argument, but it was kind of like a morality argument. Like,
no, it was 100%. It's
what are you supposed to do? Like,
yeah. What's the correct way about going about things? There might not be a correct way necessarily, right? But Mace Windu thinks there is. And again, with the dialogue here was super efficient. There was just a couple lines here and there that kind of show Mace Windu's discontent. Like when he's in the cell with that guy, with the Scarface guy with the two eyes that are different colors, which I called immediately. I'm like, that's the bad guy, obviously.
Dude, he branded himself. He looked evil.
I know. When he's in the cell with him and he's like, you actually make good points. Like, I don't disagree with you 100%. Like, you're just trying to protect your planet. I get that, you know? And it's just like one or two lines. Very efficient, but effective in terms of showing us where Dooku's headspace is.
Yeah, and kind of feeling that betrayal at the end when they go to Master Katri's funeral and they come out and Dooku's like, are you kidding me? You knew when you went to Raxus and you literally didn't tell me? And he's like, and Mace is like, I'll make sure to represent you on the council. And he's like, thanks, Master Jedi. It's just like, you can totally understand why he wants to turn, why he wants to leave. And so I just thought it was, again, it gives so much depth to Dooku. And they're doing this in less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is phenomenal. And it already changes your perspective on Attack of the Clones.
It's completely packed. It also shows you, like, I think one thing that I've thought is interesting in the Star Wars world, for the last couple months is like how the Jedi act is like they're good detectives essentially. They're good at figuring things out. Yeah. And part of this is shown in this episode. They're very perceptive. You know, you can't really sneak a lot by them when they come to investigate. But also in that book I read, the brothers book about Obi-Wan and Anakin, it's kind of the same thing. They send Obi-Wan to Cato Neimoidia to go figure out like how this explosion happened, and he's the same way. Like I just think that was it's an interesting element of the Jedi that I don't think a lot of people recognize. Is they're like very detail oriented, and that was just like a cool part of the episode to me, is how they just figure it out like that, you know. And that's all it took was for Dooku to be like, let's go check it out, like let's go figure out what's going on. Let's not just leave and report it. Like we can figure this out, you know.
I also side note, I really liked that sequence when they're in the forest and they're kind of walking around and figuring it out. I thought the music there was great. It actually, this has nothing to do with anything, but it reminded me a lot of the music for Jedi Fallen Order. Mm-hmm. Just like the cues there, which, by the way, side note, they were clearly using like an actual orchestra for this. And I just thought the music has never sounded better for Star Wars animation. And it made the episodes, for me, that much more immersive. Yeah. And more of an experience. And so I thought the music when they're walking through the forest and they're trying to figure it out, I thought that was just like exceptional. And it really did help with the overall tone and feeling and impact of these episodes. But yeah, as far as episode 3 goes, I thought it did a great job of just kind of getting into the dogma of the Jedi and their kind of like their Hippocratic nature, like they're hypocrites. Like,
well, the other thing too to point out here is there is a time jump. So I didn't realize this initially until the third like Dooku episode, but there's time jump. So it's like this happens over a long period of time, which I think was really, it's an important thing to note. Is like it wasn't just like 2 days where he's like, all right, I'm sick of this. It was like we had that first episode where he looks younger. He's with Qui-Gon. Second episode, which I'm guessing is a couple years later, there's some more disillusionment internally within his own ranks, and then by the last episode, it's like that's even further down the line, like what, 10 years down the line, and he's like, all right, I've had it. You know, so it's over a long period of time. It just wasn't something that happened quickly, but that was a nice little thing that I appreciated. Was
he went from looking like Count Dracula in the first episode to like he was in his Count Dracula phase to the Dooku that we come to start to know in the Clone Wars. But even then, he still looks incredibly different.
Also, let's talk about real quick, because we haven't mentioned this with the last 2 episodes, the like senators fighting
or the fighting styles. Yeah, the fighting.
Really cool. The animation there is just they've really nailed in on how to do that. The first one with him and Qui-Gon like blocking and defending, and then this one they just make quick work of these droids that come in.
Dude, the sound design in the second episode where Dooku goes, and then he pulls across and goes, and
Yeah.
you're like, that sounds so good. I had my headphones in when I was listening to that, and it just, perfect. It was so good. And then their fighting style, the way that Dooku in the third episode where he cuts down the tree and then he force pushes it on top of the guys and then he like flips back over. It was just like, yes, the Jedi doing their stupid little flippy shit. I love this so much. So that was just fantastic. And last note on this episode before we get into the fourth one, because the fourth one's my favorite episode, but the senators, just like the general senators having like that overall theme of like, they're not great people.
Yeah, they're kind of losers. Yeah.
Yeah, like this guy is like there's that overall theme of like the two guys just like letting their planet suffer.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, and then the people are like having a response to that, and it was interesting to me because it's like, wow, the Jedi don't come to the defense of the people, they come to the defense of the senators.
Right.
Which
they're not doing what's in the best interest for everyone else, which is why Mace Windu is incorrect in this third episode.
So I just thought I like that thematic element that they've started to thread through each episode. But I guess that leads us into episode 4, which is easily my favorite one, by far, without a doubt. The Sith Lord.
Mm-hmm. It's the best one. I think it stands out. It's one of the longest ones too. It's like 13 minutes.
So episode 4, The Sith Lord. So we have things to note here. Dooku's working for Palpatine well into the Phantom Menace, as we find out, which is not what I thought initially. I don't know what I thought initially. But the fact that he's like working up until this timeline, like he's already betrayed the Jedi and he's already had Master Sifo-Dyas killed. He's already had the creation of the clones. And as we see in the introduction of this episode, he's deleted Kamino from the Jedi archives. Yeah. And I did not expect the timelines to be this close. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't that. And to see that, like, Dooku's already been well into this is fascinating to me because he's not really, like, a designated bad guy yet, even though he's betrayed the Jedi. So,
yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love that. I think this is kind of why I like the show, is the little details that we get that fill in some gaps about Phantom Menace between that time and Clone Wars. Obviously, there's a lot of time that goes on in between those two things, and getting details like this of how Dooku had his fall from grace and how the whole thing worked with him deleting the archive files and becoming Sidious's apprentice is super interesting to me. We see him at the beginning of the episode, obviously, deleting this stuff. He's just kind of secretively doing this. Kind of like you said, it's like he's been doing this working for Sidious for longer than maybe we had thought. But that relationship seems to me like he's still kind of conflicted in it. He's just doing it because he's like, I've had enough of this and I don't believe I'm on the right path. And that's why I have to do these other things because that's what's true to like me, you know?
Yeah.
And he actually does believe in what Sidious is doing.
Right. And at least like he definitely feels conflicted. And what I find personally interesting about this is it really came off that he kind of wanted to convert Qui-Gon into this. Mm-hmm. Because he has, obviously, Master Jocasta, or I don't even know if she's a master, or Jedi Jocasta, the librarian, comes up to him and she's like, hey, so she's like, your apprentice says that he's encountered a Sith Lord on Tatooine. Oh, he's so funny. He's got such an active imagination. And Qui-Gon's like, yeah, or no, Dooku's like, yeah. And then later we have this scene in the Jedi Temple hallways where, well, first of all, Qui-Gon's talking to Jedi Master Yaddle, voiced by Bryce Dallas Howard, which, side note, she crushed that, by the way.
Very good.
The second note is Yoda's just a freak.
Yeah.
Because Yaddle speaks with a normal way of speaking.
Yeah.
And that was really jarring to me, but I applaud
point,
them. I applaud them on that because I think it makes the entire experience that much funnier. So I'm totally here for it, but a side tangent, I really do think that Bryce Dallas Howard did a great job. Like, if you didn't tell me that was her, I would have no idea.
Yeah.
So I thought she did a fantastic job, but Qui-Gon and Yaddle are walking in the hall. They run into Dooku, and Dooku's like, hey, I heard you ran into a Sith Lord. And he's like, did the council dismiss it? And Qui-Gon was like, Yeah, and Yaddle, who I presume is still on the council at this point. That's
Yeah.
the way it came
Yeah.
off. She's like, well, they just want to be cautious. And Dooku's like, yeah, but they don't take anything seriously. So
and he's like, and he knows Qui-Gon. He's like, Qui-Gon's not an idiot.
yeah, he's like, Qui-Gon's not stupid. That's my apprentice. And so you can really see his frustration there. Also, just side tangent again, having Liam Neeson just voice Qui-Gon, like
Great surprise.
you cannot replace that man. Like, I feel like had they tried to, it just wouldn't have worked because his voice is just so untouchable. Like, you just hear it, you're like, it's too good. Like, you could not get another actor to replace Liam Neeson. And so when he just opened his mouth and he started talking, I was like, all the feels. This is just fantastic. But that is another good example of the council's arrogance in the we would have caught it mentality. There's no way this would have happened. So we get to the next scene, and Dooku's standing in front of the Jedi Tree of Life. I think there's a name for it. I'm not entirely sure, but we see this tree a lot in the Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. It's very prevalent in the Clone Wars, and he's standing in front of it. And I just got to say, on this particular scene, I got extremely emotional because when Dooku's standing in front of this tree and Yaddle comes up behind him and Dooku just starts talking. He's like, I used to take Qui-Gon here as a boy. Yeah. He loved this tree, having grown up on this planet. And he's like reminiscing about his Padawan. And then Yaddle behind him goes, oh yeah, the council's heading out to Naboo for the funeral. And it's weird because that line still hit me. Like, as if it was hitting me for the first time. Because obviously, like, when Qui-Gon dies in The Phantom Menace, it's extremely sad. You're like, no, this character's awesome. He's so cool. He shouldn't have died. But, like, that little bit of dialogue where she's like, yeah, the council's flying out for his funeral and it's on Naboo. It felt like I was experiencing that for the first time, even though you know that he's already dead. And I just thought, like, wow, what a powerful moment for Dooku's character, but also for, like, the viewer, because there's still that little bit of hope that he's, like, not dead. So I thought that was extremely cool. What did you think about this scene? I have so many thoughts about this particular scene, but I want to give you a chance to go ahead.
It makes him more sympathetic, obviously. Mm-hmm. Qui-Gon's death is like the saddest in all of Star Wars for me. But and it's sad for Obi-Wan because that's his master, right? But then you get to see it from a different perspective, which is the guy who pretty much raised him, and it makes you really feel for him. Also, we find out Qui-Gon was raised on Coruscant, which I didn't know. I didn't know that. I don't know if you knew that, but that's a nice.
I did not.
That's a nice little tidbit we get there. And then that's like the last straw for Dooku. He's like, because I wouldn't be pleasant company. Like if he went to Naboo, he's clearly mad that the council didn't like take him seriously. But it really it adds so much more depth, and it was again the efficiency here in the scene. It's like they just had a couple lines here and there. That's all they needed to really nail this point home. So I agree with you. It's one of the most powerful scenes in this whole like short season or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I loved it. The way seeing Dooku like have that care for Qui-Gon makes you just empathize with the character so much more.
Yeah.
And it adds so much more depth to him. That's why I constantly think about that scene in the Clone Wars or Attack of the Clones. When he's like, I wish Qui-Gon were here now. Like, you even get that. He's like, because you could tell, even in that one line that Christopher Lee makes, you're like, oh, he clearly cared for him, And now that we're able to see this relationship, even if it's just a short couple episodes, it added a lot of depth.
So I don't know if I just want to get your take on this, because I know that you're a big fan of the soundtrack, Padme's Ruminations.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed this, but like at the very end, I talk about this in my reaction video. It's just like I went back and I listened to all those soundtracks because they did release the full soundtrack to the Tales of the Jedi. The music that's playing when Dooku is standing in front of the tree is very reminiscent of Padme's Ruminations, because it's that pivotal moment right before the title character goes to the dark side. And for Dooku here, they're really showing us, or at least I thought, like, the thing that pushed him over the edge was Qui-Gon's death.
Yeah.
Like, that was the final, okay, that's it.
I'm committed.
The council screwed up. I'm done. Like,
I'm going to now pledge my allegiance, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. And
that soundtrack echoed that.
Right. And they played it again. There's echoes of that when he's with Sidious. But by the way, in this episode, we do get Ian McDiarmid back, I believe, as
that is him.
Emperor Palpatine, which is sick. That also added so much. Like, this is also during a timeline that we know, and it was such a short episode, but there's so much packed in. It felt really long, actually.
It did. It felt like 20 minutes.
I praise the writers. They were just they trimmed all the fat, kept only the necessary stuff in there. The music added a ton. So again, you're right. Kevin Kiner killed it. But yeah, the symbolism here, like that matters. That stuff matters. I'm very passionate about like film music and like scoring in TV shows because it adds so much to the story if you do it right. That's why some of these things are so memorable. So I loved that. I thought you're right. I noticed that immediately too. Like and it's in like that same timeline as well. Like in the parallels between him and Anakin, and you're like, they kind of have a point. I don't really fully disagree with them on why they're doing what they're doing, you know. And I watch it differently now. I think that's why it's interesting is I see it from a different point of view the older I get. Mm-hmm. Like when I was a kid, I'm like, no, don't turn to the dark side. And then like I watched Revenge of the Sith like maybe a year ago, and I'm like, oh no, dude, like I totally get where you're coming from.
No, Anakin's like, I totally get Anakin's character so much more as an adult because I'm like, yeah, I would be afraid too. Like that, I'd be terrified if I was going to lose like my spouse or a family member that I was extremely close to. I wouldn't know what to do. Like there's nothing scarier to me than the prospect of losing someone extremely close to you. So it's like, coming from that perspective, it's like I really get Anakin now, which is why he's one of my favorite Star Wars characters. But to take it back to Dooku real quick, I just really liked that we didn't get a lot of him with Qui-Gon, but the moments that we got were so personal and so specific that when you get to that moment at the tree, you're like, shoot, here we go. He's done. He's fully immersed himself in this. So he flies off to see Chancey Palps in that little factory area, like in Attack of the Clones, which another great attention to detail. I love that area. And they also include the musical motif of that woman doing the operatic singing, just super like creepy, creates that aura. Having Ian McDiarmid was absolutely fantastic. And then we get a great confrontation scene with Yaddle and Palpatine, who are essentially like the angel and the devil on Dooku's shoulders, that he has to choose who he's going to listen to. Yaddle in the light and Palpatine in the dark.
Yeah, and you see Dooku in the middle. There's that shot of Yaddle on one side, Dooku in the other. They also did this in the when he first talks to Yaddle. And at the end of the scene, it zooms out, and you can see Dooku walking into the dark, and Yaddle's walking into the light. Yaddle walking into the light, So, again, it's attention to detail.
And then Dooku just kind of goes ham in a great fight sequence, which, again, the score was so good, because you know that scene where he turns around and all of a sudden Yaddle isn't there? And then they have that one piano note going, dun, dun, and it's so good in that scene because it just sets the tension. I was like sweating. I was so nervous. And then Yaddle calls out to him and she's like, hey, I stepped down from the council. You're right. And they're wrong. Qui-Gon didn't have to die. Dooku hears her and he's like, nope, sorry. You got to go. You were one of them and I've already chosen this, so it's too late for me. And he crushes her in the doorway, which I honestly thought that was the end. That scared the bejesus out of me.
Yeah, I was like, that's kind of brutal way to go.
It was pretty brutal. But then the follow-up scene where she force pushes the door open and the Force theme kicks in and the light floods in and it shines. You know what's crazy awesome? I got to go off on this scene for a second. So Yaddle is like force pushing the door open, right? And she's like, it's like the last bit of strength that she has. The light floods in. Palpatine is blinded by the light. He can't look into it. Like he's covering his face.
Yeah.
Whereas Dooku's looking directly into it. And it's shining on his face. And then eventually, like, the light gives way and it all goes out because it's just too late to save Dooku. So, like, the symbolism there of, like, the light being too much for Palpatine to handle. Dooku's looking at it, but he's still actively rejecting it.
Yeah.
And then Yaddle collapses in, and then it's like, there is no chance that he's coming out of this.
Yeah.
So I thought that symbolism there was extremely beautiful and heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I got a big kick out of that. It's those little nuances that they do to tell the story. Palpatine can't handle this. There was a chance for Dooku, but it's too late now.
Very well done. I think the fighting was really cool, too, to see Yaddle's fighting style versus Dooku's. And Sidious just watches. And then, obviously, Dooku strikes her down. Cold move. And we see the Sith eyes from Sidious, which was cool. The theme that plays there. When he's like, then let me bring you peace, or whatever. That line he has before just... So all that was all. I mean, this was the standout best episode, I think.
It was
all
by
the
far the
Dooku
best.
stuff was amazing. So all in all, like, that was my favorite. I love how it tied in. Makes Dooku an infinitely more interesting character. Even though he was interesting before, it makes him so much more interesting, I think. because he's still conflicted, like kind of at the end. But he's like, I've already committed to this. I have to do it, and I'm going to move forward with it, even though I might not 100% agree with everything Sidious is doing. I'm still gonna do it.
It's interesting because I don't even know if I really look at Count Dooku as like a traditional bad guy, because in the Clone Wars he's a little bit more like a Saturday morning cartoon villain, whereas in these he's like, is he the bad guy? And I guess one could argue yes, but it makes that line a little bit harder to draw, because it's like he is doing it for the right reason. Wrong decisions, but like doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah,
or maybe
right.
it's not the right reasons, or maybe I'm not saying this correctly, but it's like he has the right thing in mind, you know?
He's looking. He has good intentions.
He has good intentions, and maybe not the execution, maybe not the execution or killing Master Yaddle or whatever, but it's like, I wonder how that would have gone if Qui-Gon had lived, but because Qui-Gon died, that just really sent him over the edge. So I just thought that
weird
was...
that like Qui-Gon dies to a Sith and then Dooku becomes a Sith. Like, that's kind of weird to me. Like, oh, I'm going to become the same thing that killed my former apprentice.
I think he got more and more lost as it went on, you know? So I think he kind of like started out, because at the end of that episode, like, yeah, he kills Yaddle, and that's a pretty evil thing to do, right? Is to kill somebody else. That's pretty evil, right? But even at the end, like, he still looks remorseful. Like, you know, like it's not like he wanted to do this. It's a lot like Anakin. Like, he has good intentions, but I think it's like, once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny, according to Yoda. So maybe it was just like a gradual thing. It's like, the more you do, the harder it is to get away.
Yeah, either way, I mean, to sum it up, this is the standout episode, the Dooku arc. I wish we just had more of it, and I hope we do get more of it.
I want a Qui-Gon and Dooku show.
Yeah, it was really, really good. Like, this is the kind of stuff I want in Star Wars content. It's like just developing these other characters more in subtle ways. It doesn't even have to be like a ton. Like, we only got a little bit of Qui-Gon, but they used him very well and efficiently in these episodes. So that wraps up the Dooku ones, but those to me were the standout by far, most interesting. Like, give me more of that if we can.
The next one is Practice Makes Perfect, which is a Lost Clone Wars episode. No, it's an Anakin and Ahsoka storyline. And this was definitely my second favorite episode.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I really, really, really liked this one, because I felt like, well, first of all, it's just tragic. Because the way that they tie it into Clone Wars Season 7, it does kind of tie back, like, okay, if all the Jedi died, how was Ahsoka able to sense that the clones were going to attack her and then defend herself? And in this beautiful poetic way, it's like, yeah, Anakin trained her extremely hard, but that, like, his last gift to her, you know, like the last like extension of friendship that ultimately saved her life from the thing that he caused.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it.
But because he did that, she lived, and she had a one-up on every other Jedi that died. So I really enjoyed there were a lot of things I enjoyed about this episode. I really enjoyed that the clones help her with her training. I think that's like a super cute, fun aspect of it. Yeah. I really think it highlights her bond with Captain Rex, where essentially like they have to fight that thing off together. And so I really liked how they highlighted that. They brought it back with Season 7. I think this episode did a lot of justice to every person that exists in the Star Wars universe in terms of hotness, particularly Obi-Wan. Because you get that one shot of him when Anakin walks into the dojo and he sits down and Obi-Wan's just looking mighty fine, and you're like, holy crap, they did not pull their punches with this animation style. Everyone looks so good.
You know what else? Speaking of hot guys,
oh no, Qui-Gon in the young
bones.
Young Qui-Gon.
It's like squeaky.
Yeah, he's pretty hunky. I work with this girl, and I went into the office, and she came over to me. She's like, "How about young Qui-Gon?" It was pretty funny. I think everybody's a simp for young Qui-Gon. But what did you think of this episode? I really liked it because my Clone Wars loving heart obviously can't resist anything Anakin and Ahsoka. But what did you think?
Yeah, I think it's fine. I didn't like love it. I know you're a way bigger Clone Wars Ahsoka fan than I am. I'm not like a huge Ahsoka fan. She's interesting to me, but you brought up some good points now, which make it a little bit more interesting. It's a good analysis on your part. But I thought it was good. It's definitely a good way to show the relationship, you're right, between her and the clones. it was, I didn't have much to like say on it. I'm like, yeah, this is interesting. Well done. Like, cool. I like how they tied it in with season 7 of Clone Wars as well. That was dope. We get the reanimation of Obi-Wan. They kind of fixed him a little bit. Like,
Yeah, they smoothed his hair out, and it wasn't as stiff. And interestingly enough, they chose to give him the mullet.
Yeah, I know. I noticed that too.
Does that even tie up with the timeline?
I don't know, because that's the first thing I noticed too. I'm like, when is this timeline then? Because like if he has the mullet, because actually in that book Brotherhood that I talk about, they talk about Obi-Wan like cutting his mullet off, and it's sometime during the Clone Wars, like in that period.
So it's like, did he cut it off and then grow it back and then cut it off again?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's like kind of what I was thinking. I have no idea.
So they definitely like smoothed out his features. His beard isn't as like stiff.
Yeah.
Like it just looked really nice.
Just a new iteration of Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Get some plastic surgery done. But I thought it was good. Like, cool to see their relationship. It's lower on the list of episodes for me. I thought the standouts were number 4, number 6, and then 2 and 3. Like those are probably my.
Oh, you like number 6 better.
Better than number 5, yeah. Better than.
Oh, we'll have to get into that. I really liked this episode because I love the original Clone Wars crew of Obi-Wan, Anakin, Rex, Ahsoka, and then of course Dave Filoni can't let us get past the pain of Order 66. So naturally, it just has to tie back into Order 66
every time.
Every time, I swear, this guy just loves his Order 66 content, which is fine.
I do too. So keep it coming. Whatever.
Keep it coming, Dave. We're not going to say no. But yeah. I just think that this was like a treat for the Clone Wars fan. I thought it was like a lost episode. That's like you've never gotten to see this side, and I think it added more depth. Like I liked seeing the training dojo. I like the Anakin and Obi-Wan quips, and he's like, "You're right on time," and he's like, "Oh, I thought I was late." He's like, "That's exactly what I meant."
Yeah.
And then Anakin stealing Obi-Wan's line later, and I thought it was beautifully shot too. You know, like the way
all of these were really well done. I think that's why I like this next episode a little bit more.
What'd you like about it?
Well, so I think that's one of the reasons why I think the animation in it was stunning. There's obviously this is the one, I forget what it's called, but it's
called Resolve.
And it's where the Ahsoka's like right after Order 66. She's working in this village, typical Jedi thing to do, hiding out, baling hay or whatever.
Obi-Wan of her.
And then the Inquisitor comes, and that little narc tells on Ahsoka because he finds out she's a Jedi, and because she saves the guy with the Force powers or whatever, and then the Inquisitor comes and burns down the whole village, which, by the way, is a dick move. Like, someone just did your job for you, and your response is to burn down their village. Not very nice, dude. What are we doing here? He's like, you lied to me. It's like, he gave you a lead. He gave you a lead. And you just burn down everything and kill all the people there. A little intense. Like that scene of her, Ahsoka, and the Inquisitor, like, in the fire was really cool, and like the fire animation was really well done. This guy also, whoever designed this guy, I don't know who he is or whatever, but he's a super cool looking Inquisitor.
Yeah,
I think there was one missed opportunity in this though. However,
okay,
I thought they were going to show us her taking the kyber crystal or something, you know?
Oh, and bleeding them.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Like, I was like, oh, then we're going to figure out how she, you know, makes her new white lightsabers.
I honestly think that Dave is saving that because this little story is
probably going to be in the live action one, I would
guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. This little story is based off of the Ahsoka book, which, full disclosure, I'm going to be perfectly honest, I did not think that book was good. I think I have said this on the show before, but I did not think it was that well written. I don't really think it told a new story, and it wasn't great. I thought it was super so-so. So I was very happy to see that Dave took this story into his own hands and told the story that he felt he needed to tell. And which was, he took certain elements of it, but he really made it his own, which I appreciated. Again, I think he's saving the kyber crystal thing.
Yeah.
And I don't really think that was like the main point of the story. I think the main point of the story here was to kind of show her like, hey, Ahsoka's really beaten down. She just lost Anakin and Padme. She went to Padme's funeral after having to bury all of these clones with Captain Rex. And she's beat down and she doesn't want to get back in the fight. And I feel like this whole episode was to just be like, she can't watch somebody suffer and look away. And I feel like that harkens back to the Inquisitor's line in Kenobi where he's like, Jedi can't help what they are. They're going to help people because that's just the way of things. It's just in their nature. So the whole purpose of this story, I gathered, was like, she can't look away anymore and she wants to help. And I felt that like after this episode, this is where she starts to become Fulcrum and then get really actively involved in the rebellion, leading into Star Wars Rebels. But I think I interrupted you, and I'm sorry.
No, you're okay. I agree with all that, and that was the other thing I was going to say. Was the beginning of this episode was really good. Obviously, the Padme funeral. We get Bail and her talking right after Order 66 stuff. I really like that scene of them like talking and how he's talking to the clones, but he's actually
Which, by the way, the clones have got to be like,
yeah,
this. What is with this guy?
Yeah.
Like,
and then like the ending of it too. It's like, oh, she's ready to get back in the fight, I guess. So there was just cool elements there. I just think it's just good storytelling, good world building. Anything with Padme's funeral relating to Revenge of the Sith, I'm gonna love because that's my favorite Star Wars movie. I think is Episode 3. So,
yeah, they did some really
and obviously just
tie-ins.
showing what a badass she is still too. You know, she takes one move and just destroys one of the coolest looking Inquisitors we've ever seen.
Yeah. Oh my God, might be the best design. I'm not sure who designed that guy,
Yeah, really cool.
but like, holy crap, what a fantastic design! And not only that, I think Clancy Brown, who plays a multitude of Clone Wars characters, and he's Mr. Krabs, and he played Savage Opress on the Clone Wars. I'm pretty sure that he voiced this Inquisitor. But I saw a lot of people were like, I can't believe she took down the Inquisitor in one swoop. And I'm like, okay, dudes, but this is like Ahsoka frickin' Tano. Like, she was trained by Anakin, and she's a Jedi, and the Inquisitors are not up to par. So I was perfectly fine with that, and I thought it was badass.
Yeah.
So
I do too. I liked it. I think it was good. It was a good finish. I would have if we could have, I would have done just 6 Dooku episodes. That's how much I liked those. So, but these Ahsoka ones were good too. So all in all, I think very strong first season. I hope they do more. I really do. As I mentioned before, like it just opens up the door for so many more possibilities with telling stories about other Jedi, and you can just do bite-sized pieces. You don't have to commit to this big thing with a huge budget. The animation's fairly easy to do. And it's obviously less expensive than live action, but it's just the possibilities are endless. We could see Luke on Tatooine. We could see Anakin as a kid on Tatooine. We could see Qui-Gon off with Obi-Wan doing something. We could see Yoda. We could see Luke as like in his training school or whatever. Like
they could do
anything.
They could do the Sith.
Yes,
because I've heard people say
Maul.
do
You could
Tales
more
of the
Maul.
Sith.
Yeah, or talk like you said. Like you could do Darth Revan or Plagueis or Sidious or Anakin as a child on Tatooine with his mom, like developing that a little bit more. Kiedi Mundi. Give me some more Kiedi Mundi. show us more of Mace Windu being a dick and like getting people to turn to the dark side by not offering them a seat on the council or taking their seat from the council.
Boy,
so yeah, I mean overall, like it just opens up the door to a lot more possibilities, and it was just really well done. Very good storytelling, awesome writing, great attention to detail. And I'd like to see more of it overall.
I really hope that this is the test season, and I hope they do more because, my God, if the response alone isn't enough to do a season 2, dude, I don't know if you've seen the response to this, but it's been like overwhelmingly positive. Like people are like, yes, this is Star Wars. This is so great. Just give us more. Give us more. We do have a couple listener comments on our community page. I don't know. Do you want to take a look at those real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Do you want to read them or do you want me to?
We can switch around. Let me look.
Oh, maybe I should turn off airplane mode on my phone. That'd be helpful, right?
Okay. Hidden Scribbles writes, I was stunned by how well they were able to tell these stories in such a short amount of time. Filoni's working his magic once again. Yes, totally agree.
Why isn't he in charge of more projects?
Yeah, just put him in charge and just take your hands off the wheel, let him do whatever, because it's always a very positive response. I know some people are like they have different thoughts on him sometimes, but just the efficiency of the storytelling. I mentioned this multiple times. It was just very well done. They didn't waste a line of dialogue or a shot or a scene, a musical cue. So I totally agree with you. I think Ethan is his name.
Yeah, I just want them to give more to Dave. It's just like at this rate, it's kind of like everything that comes from him is great and everybody loves it. So why not utilize him more? Mm-hmm. Walter Edgar says, awesome Star Wars content. Loved episode 4, the Sith Lord. Same. Found myself cheering when Ahsoka took down the Inquisitor without a lightsaber with ease. Overall, great storytelling and great visuals in bite-sized chunks. Need more. Totally agree. Yeah. At the end,
chunks was great.
At the end of the last episode, where Bale's like, "Hey, Ahsoka, are you ready to get back in the fight?" I was literally like, "Where is the next episode? Like, let's go! This is a cliffhanger! Like, come on!" I thought that was a great episode to end on because it makes you want more.
Right, and I'm glad you brought that up because this is actually one of my problems with Andor right now. So if you guys have seen my reaction to the last episode, like one of the biggest problems I have with Andor is the endings are terrible. They're horrible endings. I'm sorry if you like. You can love the show, whatever. The endings are bad TV. It doesn't leave you wanting more. It leaves you just going, okay, all right. They just end. They just like stop, and there's no telling like what's going to happen next time. What are we looking forward to? Where's the plot going? Like they just have an episode. It stands alone, and then it just ends weirdly, and you're like, oh, okay. So I don't know what I'm waiting to watch next week. They don't give you enough to look forward to the next week. And so that's a big problem with Andor, which I think that was really cemented with these episodes, because you're right. With these Tales of the Jedi episodes, you're like, I want more. I want to watch more of these characters and see what they're going to do next, especially with the Ahsoka one. Like with the Dooku ones, we kind of already know what happens next with the last one. You know what I mean? But they end on like I'd like to see this. I'd like to see where this keeps going. So it just, I don't know. For me, that was a big takeaway I had, was it really highlighted one of my problems with Andor, which is the endings are not great.
They don't give you enough of a reason to tune in next week.
No, they don't. And I tune in and I'm like, what's gonna happen? They do the recap and I'm like, yeah, okay, but like, what's the big picture here? I don't know. I'm just like, okay.
It's like they're taking the show, like they take the show Andor day by day, as opposed to overarching big picture. Have you noticed that? It's more like on a daily basis of like, here's Cyril sitting in his kitchen eating cereal with his
like
mother,
pondering.
and then he
like pondering for like 3 episodes. He's just sitting there eating cereal. Like, okay.
And it's not like big picture, like overarching story of like how he's trying to fight his way into this bank or whatever. Like, I don't know, and it just doesn't. It's not as impactful, I would argue.
Yeah. So, but I think like to bring it back to the Tales of the Jedi, the stories are very intentional with how they're telling it. So even in these short bite-sized pieces. So that
and
was
it
just,
gets the timing
it's a
right.
strength for the show, and it's a weakness for Andor. We can get into the Andor thing when we do our breakdown, but I just think that's an interesting point you brought up about the ending of it, wanting more, because that was a strength of these. Brian writes, I actually enjoyed it a lot. I never cared for Dooku's character at all, but this series has changed that quite a bit, to the point where I find myself agreeing with him. Seeing a Qui-Gon again was a huge bonus, and I hope to see more of him in future media. Totally agree. Actually, I've always cared for Dooku's character, so I disagree there. I've always liked Dooku. He's always been a really cool, interesting villain to me. And good villains are ones that you can like empathize with and understand where they're coming from and understand their motivations and why they are the way that they are. And I think Dooku's really reflective of that. But these episodes just gave him more depth. And then to the Qui-Gon point, yeah, huge bonus. Give me any more Qui-Gon you can give me, because he's probably my favorite Jedi, I would say.
He's easily the best Jedi, I would argue. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I'm a total sucker for Obi-Wan, but like with the amount of Qui-Gon content we've been getting lately, and the amount of Qui-Gon content that I would assume is to come, because there's still so much to unpack with that character there, I'm not going to complain whenever we get more. Honestly, if the next announcement was a Qui-Gon and Dooku show, I would be like beyond myself. Yeah, let's go.
I'd love to see that relationship develop more.
Middleman 8 says, enjoyed them all, and I don't mind the length of the episodes if we're talking about this level of quality. Episodes 4 through 6 were my top 3, though with 5 being my absolute favorite. Why? That's better answered by experiencing it. So, sounds like he most enjoyed The Practice Makes Perfect with Ahsoka and Anakin, which I don't blame at all. I'm always a sucker for more Clone Wars content, but like episode 4 just like completely blew me away.
They were all very like solid. I think I wasn't sitting there like, you know.
Well,
why did they make this?
This
Which
is
they
probably
have to be if this is like a proof of concept thing they're trying to do, like a pilot season, you have to make them really good.
Well, here's the other thing too. You know how you and I have been talking about like a lack of understanding how time should be used in these Star Wars shows? Mm-hmm. Kenobi, way too fast. Andor, way too slow. And then you have these, which is like, we know what story we're trying to tell, and we're not going to go beyond the amount of minutes that we need to tell it. If it is a 13-minute story, it is going to be a 13-minute story, and we're not going to drag it out past 13 minutes. I really appreciate that. You know, like even some of the Mando episodes have been super short, but at least they're using the time that they need and not like rushing things or, you know, dragging it out. Like that's been one big thing with me with Andor. It's like, I feel like they're dragging out so much And because because it's a TV format and it's not a movie where you're limited by the time. But I think time limits can be really, really good because then it forces you to consider what's important for the story. And
Unless
really
you're Obi-Wan and just rush through the whole thing in a 30-minute episode. It's like you can literally make this episode as long as you want.
As long as you need it to be.
Yeah.
Like that's just the thing.
That's part of the strength of Mando, by the way.
Yes.
None of the episodes are like, it's like one will be 35 minutes, one will be like 49 minutes, one will be 53 minutes, one will be 37 minutes. It's like, but they tell the story in the amount of time it takes to tell the story.
Yeah, they don't go beyond or they don't go under. It's not like they're purposefully trying to drag it out because it's like we just need to drag this out as long as possible. It's like, no, use
Trim
what
the
you
fat
need.
A little bit. Like, let's be efficient here.
Like, let's be efficient here. Let's not add this extra dialogue or watch Cyril staring at his cereal in the kitchen for the next 3 scenes. Like, we don't need that stuff.
Yeah.
Because then it makes you question, what are you doing? Anyway, that's my tangent on the use of time. But I think the rest of our comments are pretty much like, I don't know. Love it, love it, love it.
Yeah. Look, great show. I'm happy with it. You're happy with it. Give us more. Give us more. That's all I can say.
Yeah, let's go, Disney. Come on. Let's go. Let's go. Yeah. More.
So yeah, guys, thanks for tuning in on this episode. Thanks for writing your comments. We'll do an Andor breakdown next if Melissa ever gets around to watching the new episode. And,
I will watch it, but we might need to combine episodes. Is it 8? It's 8 and 9 for next week. At least it's just like I haven't been crazy about Andor, so I've been riding the high of Tales of the Jedi, where it's like I just want to ride this high before I bog myself back down with Andor, which is so serious and so somber. So I'll get Jen,
we'll do a breakdown of that in the next episode. You can tune into that. So don't forget, subscribe, click the notification bell so you are aware when Melissa's reaction videos come out and when my reaction videos come out, when our breakdowns come out. And then leave comments. Let us know what you thought. Leave us a review if you can on Apple Podcast. If you want to go to Spotify, watch us there. These videos are uploaded to there as well. And leave us a good review there because that helps. And tell your friends. If you guys enjoy the show, tell your other Star Wars dork friends. And we'll get them to listen to. Until next time, until the new Andor one, we'll see you guys soon. Star Wars fans are eating well right now. Lots of good Star Wars content.
ate very well with this show.
Yeah. And we'll see you guys on the next Andor breakdown, I guess, right?
Yeah, but we will see you guys in the next episode. And remember, the Force will be with you always. See you guys later.